Alright, here we are. Got the Gear Rev printer up and running. The buyer on eBay sent another whole printer kit for me rather than just the control board that I needed. So I've got all kinds of extra parts. In fact, I took the extra set of linear rails that came with the second kit and put them on my Folsom to replace the well, let's take a look. To replace the stupid plastic wheels. You know, the Folsom used to have these kind of plastic rail wheels on there, which worked. But now I've got the linear rails on there, so that's real nice. So many things to talk about. Where to start? First, let's just look at part of the kit. I don't believe this printer is for beginners. It's a pain in the ass to try to get everything working right. It's definitely worth the money for the parts. These boxes here are the second kit that were sent. So I've got all kinds of extra parts. But even if you're just looking at $126 for the kit, just for everything that you get, even if you never build the printer, if you just like to tinker and design your own or modify other printers, it's a good deal. It's well worth doing. Each one of the kits came with an extra bag of parts, which gives you an extra heater, extra thermistor, extra end stop switch, extra cooling fan. Very nice to have. And well, let's go ahead and keep looking at the parts in case you're not familiar with what's in the kit. But you got your display, the power supply. The second kit that I got here had all the parts in them. These are parts left over from the first build. These are the parts from the second. I may even order another one just to have the extra parts, because I mean, when you're talking about having power supplies and heated beds and stepper motors and pulleys and belts and all the cables, the interface, all that stuff has a value, and it's nice having laying around if you like to tinker like I do. Okay, when you're putting this thing together, one of the strange things, let me try to get the tripod situated. One of the strange things that you're going to encounter to begin with, if you power it up and you've built it, you'll find that it doesn't recognize that there's a heat bed. It doesn't even show up on the display. It's not even an option. And that's because of the firmware that's in the control board as they send it to you. But when you go right to their website, right to the Gear Rev Kinematic website, they tell you the first thing to do is download their version of Slicer, which is a Kira 15.04 version. And in there it says update firmware. That's the first thing you do. So you connect your USB cable up to it and you hit the update firmware and it'll update it, and then it'll recognize that the new firmware will be for a heated bed version. Basically it's shipped with a non-heated bed version firmware. So that's the first thing you're going to do. And that'll get rid of some of that weird stuff. Okay, the first time I ordered the kit, it took 2 weeks to get delivered. 13 days, a little under 2 weeks. When I emailed them and told them about the missing control board and that the fact that the power supply was dented in, but I was able to undent it and it worked, it only took about 7 days. 7 days, and the replacement kit arrived. Let me see if that's somebody I need to talk to. No. Alright, and so yeah, you've got all the extra parts we covered. There's extra hardware as well, you know, nuts and bolts and screws. They also come with an SD card, which is empty, which you can use for anything you want. We've covered the firmware update, you're going to want to use that Cura to not only update the firmware, but you're also going to want to use that version of Cura that they give you on the website so that you can actually, they call it debugging, but I call it just the setup in order to get the thing to print level, you're gonna have to use that. Once you've done that though, you can then use any slicer you want. You no longer have to use that. One other odd thing that I noticed is the effector arms, which are carbon fiber by the way, and I can use them over on my Folsom as well. They're actually 217 millimeters center of eyelet to center of eyelet. But in all of the software setups that you go through when you're setting up the printer, it always refers to them to 210 millimeters. I'm not quite sure why that is, what that's all about. I left it and things are working, but it was kind of strange, kind of hard to understand what they're trying to do there. Now when you're running through their auto level setup, again in the debugging, the Folsom just finished. That's one more thing. While we're looking at this, I just grabbed some files off Thingiverse. It's supposed to be some sort of inverted head thing that's supposed to follow when you look at it. That isn't going to work. I just grabbed it because it looked like a small print that would print fast. I started both these printers at the same time. It's exactly the same slice file on both their SD cards. This one is finished in 2 hours and 26 minutes, and this one is only 72% done. It's getting done. It's up above the eyes, but it's not done. So it's, again, that's kind of strange. It must be something in the firmware that, because it's exactly the same sliced G-code file on both machines, and yet the Folsom ran faster. On the control board in here, you can't change the stepper driver to something else. They're, you know, surface mount soldered in. On the Folsom, they're plug and play, and if you watch some of my older videos, when I updated the Folsom, I put in the TMC 2208s to make it totally silent other than the fan. So, where am I? Okay. When you're in the auto level setup part of the program, well, maybe I should save that and we'll look at the computer when I tell you about it, because it'll make more sense. But anyway, there's a height offset number control in there, and you're going to need to adjust that after it's done its whole thing in order to adjust where, you know, the bed level, where it's actually contacting the bed, to get that first layer just right. If you leave it set at 0, which is what its default is, it'll try to print about 5 millimeters or so above the bed. So we'll get into that when we're actually staring at the computer, I think. Again, the machine seems to be exactly the same as the Micromake D1, and it came out at the same time, and it's about 96% exactly the same as the Folsom over here. Metal parts, the plastic parts. Folsom used a different control board, but other than that, they're very similar. See if there was anything else I wanted to touch on. When you are plugging in all of your cables to the control board, the far back, this is the front, so the far back's going to be your X. This is your Y, and your Z. That's kind of important as you're plugging your cables in if you want everything to work right. And as you can see, they don't really tell you where to put the power supply unit. Let's move over this way. I just grabbed a piece of aluminum channel that I had out there and bolted it to the side and put the power supply up there out of the way. Made my own filament holder back there, as you can see. Just hooked it into the channel and a bolt, nothing fancy, but it keeps it out of the way. By putting your extruder motor about a third of the way up, you can shorten your tube so that your Bowden tube, so that you're not having such a long tube, so you don't have so many retraction problems. Did the same on the Folsom as well. In fact, I could actually shorten this tube some more. I could probably take about that much more out of it and not have a sharp bend ever. That's the sharpest bend you'll ever see, and that's all the way up. This one I did shorten more. I think let's go into the other room. If the cords on my camera will let me. And in here here we should be able to look at a few things, see if any of it makes sense to you. Just trying to make it easier for you if you're trying to do this on your own. This, and I've provided the link before, but I'll provide the link again. This is the Gear Rev Kinematic's website for support. And you should watch all the videos, even though they're boring and tedious. Watch them anyway. They have tutorials here you can click to watch in specific, and they're on YouTube. And you can find more on YouTube. And this is the manual if you want to see how to assemble stuff. The software, you're going to want to get that. They have it for Windows and Mac. I don't think I bothered with any printer profiles or anything like that. Then they go on down and talk about some printable upgrades. Again, I didn't print any of those. So really the most important stuff you're going to want to look at is probably going to be your manual, and then to get your Cura version so that you can actually do everything you need to do. Okay. And the eBay link, which I just brought up this morning, right now it's showing they've still got 9 available. It has showed that before, so who knows how many he's really got. Again, I believe these are old stock. Some of them could be returned old stock. If you buy them, buy it expecting to be as is. Don't expect it to be you're going to put it together and it's going to print and be perfect. You're going to have to work with it and fool with it at the price. He's asking basically asking 140, but right there, make an offer. Go ahead and make a lower offer. I got mine for $126. Okay, what else have we got here? If you do just on the, this is a video I did about FlashForge Finder, and I'm only showing you this because if you just want parts or something that you can fix easily, the FlashForge Finders you can find on eBay for 99 bucks, and all these you pay shipping separate. And you may get a unit that just has a clog and is ready to go, or you may get a unit that's broken, but just for 99 bucks, the parts, if you strip it down, if you like to build things like I do, it's a really great deal. And if you want to spend even less money than that, and I've done 2 or 3 videos on the FlashForge, but I've also done 2 or 3 videos on the CTC printer. This one, you can still get them for 75 bucks. This will print. It doesn't produce great prints, but it will print. This particular one is where I took a CTC and modified it with drawer slides instead of linear rails, just to see if I could make a printer that would print that way with drawer slides. Let's see, here's here we are on AliExpress. You can see there's quite a few sellers all selling them. Here's 78 bucks, here's 78.20. And they're all getting about $31 for shipping. It's not a great printer, but it is a lot of parts for the 100 bucks or so you'll end up paying by the time you paid shipping and everything. So if you're just looking for parts or an education, this will print when you put it together. So it's, you know, it's worth keeping in mind. Like I said, I did quite a few videos on the Folsom when I first got it, and when I modded it with the silent steppers, and maybe I'll do another one now that I put the linear rails on there, who knows. But I think that's about it. I think we've covered most of the important stuff. If you get one that's missing parts, just contact the seller and tell them to make it right, or you'll end up, you know, having to go through PayPal to get your money back. But you know, when you buy off eBay, PayPal is going to give you your money back if you didn't get all the parts. Now, if you get all the parts and the parts work, but you're not able to put it together and make the printer work, that's actually not the seller's problem. That's actually your problem, being that the machine is a little bit too complicated or finicky perhaps for where you're at. So if you're a beginner, I don't really suggest you buy this thinking you're going to put it together and have a working printer for 126 bucks. If you love to tinker, you'll eventually get there. Let's see, I was going to show you one more thing. Let's close all of this and let's actually open the Cura. I spent probably 6 hours, and I was getting really frustrated trying to get it to complete the debugging part of the whole setup. This hasn't quite loaded all the way. You go to machine debugger, and this is the first page it's going to come to, where if the machine was now plugged in, these would become clickable. You could hit that and the machine should home. If you've wired something wrong, it isn't going to home right, so that's a good way. Down here you hit heat. It's going to heat the hot end up to 200 degrees, and then you can push the extrude button and it extrudes like 10 millimeters of filament. Or you can hit retract, and it retracts 5 or 6 or something. The point is it retracts. Allows you to test that you've got your extruder motor hooked up right and all that's working. But up here at the top you have your other tabs. You can go to the auto level, and if you've set things up the way I told you, taking your stepper motor and switch clear in the back as your X and your Y over here, then everything is going to line up and look right. I don't know how well this will show up from where you're at, but basically here on the height offset, it's powered up at 0.00 basically. You're going to want to make sure that you've got at least 4.3 in here for that number. It's a good starting point. And once you go through all the steps and try a print, if the nozzle is not close enough to the bed, or if it's too close, this is where we're going to make the change. For example, if well, it tells you, if you down here, if you read all this, it'll tell you how you do that stuff. And if you hover over these things, they tell you what they are. If nozzle position is too high, let's go back and hover over it again. If nozzle position is too high and the filament is not touching the platform when printing, decrease this number. Oh, I'm sorry. You have to start at the beginning. Increase this value if the nozzle is above or the filament's not touching the bed. And then it goes down here if basically if you're grinding your nozzle into the bed, if it's scraping the platform, then you would decrease it, put a smaller number in. It's going to raise it. At 00, it's printing about that far off the bed. So the bigger the number you put on, it's going to offset it and lower it down. The less number you put in, the higher it's going to raise it. So it's very important. I put the probe radius at 60 because I wasn't able to make it work any other way. The max tolerance will already count at 0.3. You're going to leave that alone. So anyway, then you hit the start and it starts probing everything, and it'll probe around the whole bed, and you'll see these numbers change and change color as it does them and goes around. And once it is able to achieve a tolerance that's less than 0.3, and it'll read the tolerance out here, it'll stop. And then you can go on to the next step. Like I say, I had a lot of trouble with it. At one point I was fed up and I just let it go. I let it go while I was putting the linear rails on the FL Sun, and it went up to like 96 times or something going around. It never achieved a number that was good. At that point, I actually went back and I removed some little spacers that they tell you to put on the effector rod ends up at the top, because the FL Sun doesn't need them and they're all the same castings. I took those off and came back, hooked everything back up, left the nozzle and the bed heated so everything was warm the way I would normally use it, ran all the tests, and all of a sudden I got my lowest number, which was a 0.12, which is well below that, and it was very happy and stopped. So if you have a total failure on yours, unable to get past this step, first make sure that you've got your probe radius smaller, try 60, and second, try removing the stupid little brass spacers that they tell you to put on there. So once you've done that, you can then go to the parameter, and these are all say 0 now because it fills these in based on what it did while it was probing. But what you're going to want to do then is you come down here and first hit save, and then hit upload, and then it's going to send all of those settings to the printer, and they'll be stored in the printer. I went ahead and left all of this sitting up, and the printer was still connected, but I already had a file on my SD card in the printer. So then I told using the controls on the printer, told it to start printing that file, And by doing that, I was able to see if my height was going to be correct or not on the bed, whether I need to make a change. And the first time out, it was just a little too high. It was just laying the filament just above. So then you have to go back to the auto level page, and I changed this number, just like it said, increased it. I went from starting at 4.3, I went to 4.8 on mine. And you have to run the thing again, so you run it. And then I came back to here, and I did the save, and I did the upload again. Then I went back, and I told the printer to print the same file again, and it was a perfect first layer. So I lucked out on my second attempt on that. And another confusing thing on the menu on the printer, once you've started a print, if you want to stop it or pause it, you run through the menu, you can't find that anywhere. Well, once you have started a print, you've got to go back to, in the menu where it says SD card printing, go back in there, and once you're in there, then you'll find stop and pause and things like that. So it's kind of hidden, but it's in there. I think these are all the main things I wanted to tell you. The printer does work if you get all the parts the first time out of the chute, and even if you don't, if you like tinkering and building, it's certainly worth the money just for the parts. The linear rails alone, and kind of, you know, I'm sure I'm going to buy another one, and it'd be worth it just for the linear rails and for the 2020 and all the hardware and the heaters, the fans, the steppers, all of the metal cogs and pulleys and the belts. All that stuff has a value when you like to tinker and build stuff. So for me, it's a win-win. But it may not be for you if you're a newbie, or if you just want to get a cheap printer and start printing right away. This probably isn't the printer for you, because there's kind of a steep learning curve to go with it. All right, have fun.